Hey, and welcome back to the booth. I've had so many comments and emails, and people asking me about my days back when I was touring with rock bands and working in the studio and stuff. A bunch of people have asked me to tell some stories about when I worked with Neil Young. So I dug up some photos, and I'm going to get into that. I've been asked a lot for details and anecdotes and things that you're not going to hear about unless you were there. So this is going to be a long, relaxed visit. All I'm going to do is talk and show you some pictures. So grab a chair, grab your favorite beverage, and we're going to go back in time and talk about rock and roll. Right off the bat, I got to say one thing. I'm going to try to be really honest and accurate. I'm not going to exaggerate. I'm not going to embellish, but my memory is not necessarily that accurate. So I just want you to bear with me and know I hope that I'm getting all this information right, whether it's what order things happened in or exactly what was said or what was going on at the time. So just bear with me because I know that my memory is not 100%. There may be some errors or omissions. I just want to give you this caveat. I'm doing my best. I've been lucky enough to be on stage and work in the studio with a variety of different acts. Neil Young is so iconic. His music has spanned so many decades that I thought I would talk about this. So the way this all came about is I had been working with Bachman Overdrive for about 6 years at this point, and we stopped touring as BTO because Randy wanted to spend more time at home with his family. During this time, I had been working as his studio engineer, producing demos for him. He had come up with a body of material that he wanted to release as his own project, not a BTO thing, and that project was just called Bachman, or if you're in the States, Bachman. So we recorded a bunch of demos, and then we went into some more high-end studio to do a bunch of tracking of bed tracks. I was playing drums, a guy named Richard Cochran on bass. Randy did all the guitar work and vocals. Denise McCann, his wife, did some singing. We had a couple of other people come in, do some gang vocals. We also had a great keyboard player by the name of Jason Snyderman. He's worked with a bunch of bands over the years, but his father was Sam Snyderman. And if you're in Canada, you probably remember Sam the Record Man. That business started decades and decades ago. Anyway, Sam Snyderman's son, Jason Snyderman, is a great keyboard player. And we wanted some like Wurlitzer piano, kind of like Small Faces kind of stuff, and, you know, kind of rock and roll keyboards. And he came in and provided that in the studio. That was really great. Anyway, so we were recording this album called Any Road. The producer was Chris Wardman from Toronto. The engineer was Greg Reilly. And it was all going really well. We did some kind of radical stuff. We wanted to make it sound really heavy and like not too produced and not too slick. I've got some pictures here of my drum set up in the studio. We were recording bed tracks at Crosstown Studios in North Vancouver. You can see they added this like 16-foot long sonotube to the front of my bass drum and stuck a mic at the end of it and trying to get unusual sounds. I was playing A-out drums. You could see some broken sticks and heads. My nickname at the time was Crash, Billy Crash Chapman, because I was always hitting crash cymbals and breaking sticks and breaking heads and ripping cymbals. Pretty aggressive, heavy rock drumming, a lot of fun. So we finished the album, and Randy went to Toronto to mix it to Manta Eastern Studios. And Richard, the bass player, and I waited eagerly at home, talked to him on the phone, just can't wait to hear the record when they've got it mixed. He comes back from Toronto, and he brings a DAT, digital audio tape, and puts it on, and we sit there listening, like, okay, here it is. We've been working on this for, months. Let's hear what we got. And I did not think it sounded good. We knew the tracks were good. We knew that we had played well. We had kept it tight, but rough and edgy, lots of energy, a bit of sweat in the studio. But to me, it was not a good sounding record. Now, when you're involved in the industry at that level, what's happening is there's a lot of people involved. There's, promotional people, record companies and managers, and everyone's, doing their dance, and the schedule is really tight. I mean, there's always a deadline. But I said to Randy, look, I'm sorry. I know you just spent like $2 or $3 grand a day for 2 weeks mixing this album, but I think it could be better. And I thought maybe that's just my ego. I knew what was on tape, and I felt it could sound better. We were being distributed by Sony. So what I said to Randy is, listen, let me mix one song my way. And then if you don't think it's better, we'll just release this and I'll just tell my ego to go and hide in the corner. So what we did is I went into what was called Greenhouse Studios at the time. It changed its name to Vancouver Studios, really high-end studio in Vancouver where a lot of big acts work. At the time, I had been producing a bunch of other bands and working in that studio a fair bit. So I went to Bruce, the owner, and I said, look, I know this is a long shot. And I know your studio goes for like $1,000 or $2,000 a day. But I just want one day for free. And all I can promise you is I'm going to go in, I'm going to mix a song. If our record company and the other people involved in the project think it sounds better, we'll come and mix the whole record here, and you'll make a shitload of money. So anyway, he was a really good guy, and he said, sure, I'll give you a day for free. So I go in, and I mix one song, the title track of the album. It's called Any Road. It's a powerful track with Denise singing background vocals and Jason playing keyboards. It's got a lot of rock and roll energy, but it's also got like a high fidelity thing. And I thought, this is going to be it. So what I did is I mixed it and we sent it to Graham Henderson, our lawyer, and our manager at the time, I think it was Swell Management that was managing us, and Sony, blindfolded, right? Just 2 mixes of the same song. And we just said, tell us which one you prefer. Well, lucky for me, we sent it out to like 4 people, and everybody said, that second mix sounds better. That was my mix. All of a sudden, I'm going to mix the Bachman album. I'm real excited about it because I've been working with Randy for a lot of years, and I totally believe the record could sound better. To be honest, I don't even know if I charged Randy above whatever my regular salary was as his studio engineer for mixing the album. But I just did it because I believed in the project and I believed in the songs. But this creates a bit of stress because all of a sudden the brakes are on. We're supposed to be booking tour dates and promotional things and doing some videos and everything. And all of a sudden everything's like, oh, everything's on hold. Randy wants to remix because of me. But something really cool happened. Randy had written a song called Prairie Town about growing up in Winnipeg. Neil Young, he was born in Toronto, I think, but he grew up in Winnipeg, and so did Randy. And in the 60s, the early 60s, they were playing in different bands, different parts of the city. So they never played together because they were both singing guitar players, but they were really aware of each other. Randy had written this song about his roots, about, growing up in Winnipeg, learning to drive in the snow and all that. And we had recorded 2 versions of the same song on the album. One of them was a 4-chord, heavy rock, balls to the wall rock song. And the other one was like a really slow kind of country thing with what sounded like steel guitar on it, kind of haunting and laid back. Because they kind of have different energies, but both of them are Canada and both of them are Winnipeg. That's what Randy was thinking. He had sent a copy of the lyrics to Neil months before, and Neil had said, great, really love it, sounds like a great song. All of a sudden, one day, Randy gets this fax, remember fax, from Neil Young. It says something like, I'd really like to play and sing on this track with you. Randy just about loses it. He's so excited. So he books himself on a plane to go down to Neil Young's ranch in California and record Neil. Now we're going to look at some photos that Randy shot when he went down to Neil Young's ranch to record Neil. Randy had some sort of digital camera. They're not the best images, but they do document what his experience was there, and it's really cool. At Neil Young's ranch, he has a very different studio setup than almost anyone that I've been to. Daniel Lanois' Kingsway in New Orleans was kind of like this, but a little different. In Neil Young's studio, it's called Redwood Digital. It's on his property, Broken Arrow Ranch, Half Moon Bay, south of San Francisco. There's a room that all the musicians set up in. Any of you that are musicians know there's always a glass between the studio where the musicians are and the control room where the engineer and the producer are and where all the recording takes place. Neil Young's studio doesn't have that. He's just got a room and you set up and you try to move things around and get it sounding good. And there's no window to the control room because Neil says, I don't want to see guys in there shaking their heads or, scratching their face and they're not sure about the technical thing. His thing is like the magic happens in this room. On the other side of this wall, instead of the other side of the window, their job is to record it. Make sure you get it. It sounds great. It doesn't distort. And during this whole process, I got to talk quite a bit with John Nowlan, and he runs Redwood Digital Studios. And he kind of explained to me about that whole thing. Basically, you just make sure you record it, because Neil doesn't want somebody saying, can you give that to me again or whatever. Neil's a guy that just, the magic comes out and you got to record it. It's got to be there, because he's like a one-take wonder. He just does it. He doesn't want it polished. If he didn't sing it like the way he did in rehearsal or 20 minutes ago, he's just going to do what feels right, and that's it. And I think that's what people love about his stuff. You can hear the honesty, not just in the lyrics, but in the performance. Like, the guy is committed and passionate about what he's singing. It's important to him, and the technology does not get in the way. This is Neil sitting at his white baby grand piano, just playing a little bit for Randy, and Randy took this still picture and was just blown away to be there. You can see the mic stands in the background. Rust is my favorite color. That's a sign in the studio, typical Neil. There's Neil singing. You can see from his pose, he's into it. There he is singing along on Prairie Town, the song written by Randy Bachman. This is the inside of the control room. There's John Nowlan. That's a more current photo. Redwood Digital. This is Neil playing Old Black, or whatever he calls his Les Paul. But look carefully. He's standing in the doorway of the recording studio. He's not wearing headphones. He's recording a solo in this shot. But what you see, if you look beyond him, you'll see the console and the speakers. He does not like to wear headphones, so he stood in the doorway between where the amp was, which is to his right, and where the control room is, to his left. Now, this is a very unusual thing, but it's typical Neil. If he wanted to hear more of the backing track, he'd lean into the control room a little bit more, or say, hey, John, turn it up a bit. But if he wanted to hear more of his guitar, he could lean out closer to his amplifier so that the pickups are facing the speakers. You get sustain, you get feedback, you get all that stuff you do when you play live. Anyway, I thought that was just an amazing shot. So I mentioned that the music lawyer that we worked with is Graham Henderson. Okay, the guy has been in the industry forever. He's worked with Universal. He was inducted into the Canadian Music Industry Hall of Fame a while back. This guy has worked for everybody, and he is very together as a lawyer, but he's also Margo Timmins' husband. So in the slow version of Prairie Town, Randy wanted to get Margo to sing some background vocals. She thought, how cool would it be to have like Margo singing and Neil Young singing in the same song, an iconic song about winter in Canada. So we booked a flight for Margo to come to Vancouver and record, but when she came to record, Randy wasn't here. And I don't remember if he was down recording Neil's parts or whatever, so I ended up producing Margo's session. I've spent a lot of time producing acts, and I'm comfortable in that chair. And I'll tell you a secret. If you're a producer, rule number one, make the artist comfortable. If the artist comes in and is comfortable, they will give a better performance than if they feel in any way awkward. So what I did, I bought a bunch of flowers, I set up a little table, I found out what her favorite tea was, and we had that ready. And I worked with her, getting her to sing her vocal parts. And if you listen to the slow version of Prairie Town on the Bachman album, you'll hear that she actually does like an answer thing. She answers Randy and Neil. And that was my idea in the studio. I thought, hey, let's do something a little bit different instead of having them all sing at once and doing harmonies. Anyway, that's me working with the beautiful Margo Timmins. And I don't mean just beautiful like she's nice looking. I mean, she's just an amazing artist to work with. She's very flow. She's very fun. She's very intuitive. And her voice, well, I'm sure you know her voice. So this is a shot of me working with Randy in Greenhouse Studios in Vancouver as we prepare to mix the album my way. We added a few other little guitar overdubs now that we had a little extra time. And the reason that I love this is Randy's playing my 1961 Strat. Now, Randy has a massive guitar collection, but he came up with an idea and I just happened to have my old Strat in the next room. So the moral of the story is, this extra time that we had because I was going to mix the album just happened to create an opportunity for Neil Young to play guitar and sing, and Margo to come and sing. I'll tell you, Randy was over the moon. He was so excited about this because he's always been a fan of both of those artists. And you can see here is a CD. We made a CD just for radio of the slow and the fast version of the song Prairie Town on the Bachman Any Road album. And you can see here the CD sleeve. Yeah, this was just a promotional thing sent to radio stations and friends of the band. And look, a cassette. Remember cassettes? So we got to have Neil Young guest on these two versions of this song, Prairie Town. Awesome. But it gets better. A few weeks later, Randy's in contact with Elliot Roberts. Elliot Roberts is Neil's manager, or was at the time, and I think he was for a long time. And he said, if you want to do a video for this song, Neil has some time this weekend. I've never seen Randy so happy. He's like, oh my God, Neil wants to be in the video. We scramble knowing that we have to get our shit together and get down to San Francisco right away. So we decide, yep, we're all in. We're going to go down to San Francisco, to Half Moon Bay, south of San Francisco, to Neil Young's ranch and record a music video. I got a little AOT drum set, took all the heads off, nested the shells so they were as small as possible because there weren't drums in the room that we were going to be recording in. And we got our ass down there. I got to tell you, it was such a trip. Up until this point, Neil had played and sang on these songs, but we hadn't been in the same room. Randy had gone down to do those recordings. So all of a sudden, hey, I got to go down and meet Neil Young and play drums. Not everybody gets to do that. I'm pretty lucky. The other thing we decide on our way down there is like, look, there's two versions of the song, a slow and a fast one. Neil sang on them both and played. Why don't we just do two videos in one day? If any of you know about production, it's a lot of stuff to coordinate. But we decided, let's do two videos in one day, minimal lighting, minimal everything, just get it in the can. So we brought a cameraman, Roy Pike from Toronto. He brought a 35mm camera package, and there was another guy there with a 35mm camera package so that every time we play the song, we're capturing multiple angles. The other guy was David Myers. Now, David Myers is like a legend. Not only has he done most of Neil Young's videos, he was one of the primary cinematographers at Woodstock. He's worked with Dylan, everybody. So we end up in a room full of like musical props and stuff. So we set up a drum set and a couple of amps, and we're just ready for Neil to arrive. Turns out the building that they're in is the building where they recorded Ragged Glory. And if you know that Neil Young album, you'll know that there's like a wide angle, actually a fisheye shot of this room full of musicians. That's where we were. And on the walls, there were like props from the Garage Band tour and stuff. Yeah, we had minimal lighting. We were kind of just running by the seat of our pants, guerrilla style shooting. On the way to the studio, John Nallen says, hey, do you have time for a quick stop? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you want to see a boat? I'm like, yeah. And he takes us down to the harbor nearby and takes us aboard the Ragland. This is the Ragland. The Ragland was Neil Young's boat, a 101-foot-long schooner. He sailed all over the world in this thing. When you live a life like someone like Neil Young, the paparazzi are everywhere, and he doesn't like to fly, you want to be on your boat. So I got to go aboard, walk around. She's a beautiful vessel. There's a picture here of the inside. It's all finished in redwood. It's just beautiful. That table right in the middle of the living room, John Nallen was telling me that that piece of wood came from, there's like a little pond in Neil Young's farm, and they dragged that stump out of there. And it had been underwater for God knows how long. So they just, cut it up and made it into a table on his boat. The reason it's called the Ragland is that's Neil Young's mom's maiden name. So we're pretty excited and kind of nervous and ready to try to shoot two music videos in one day. And Neil walks in, but he's got a cane. He's walking with a cane. And I'm thinking like, oh, this does not look good. As I remember it, and this could be wrong, I heard that he was like, had a hang gliding accident or something, but whatever. We're all a little concerned, but he was in a really good mood. He put on his guitar and we're like, okay, let's do this, right? Now, when Randy went down to record Neil's parts, Neil's kind of a one-take guy. He's like a one-take wonder. He's like, turn the tape on, I'm going to play a guitar solo. And he's just like, go, go. He didn't even remember the changes of the song. Randy had sent him a copy of the song, but he hadn't even listened to it. So he just cranks his amp up, picks up his guitar, and says, let's record. And he just starts playing this solo. I think he did maybe 3 takes of guitar solo stuff. And some of it was awful. He's just like he's in the wrong key or whatever. But that's just him. He just does it and it's over. So Randy was away And I was getting ready to mix the album, and I was entrusted with taking the guitar and vocal parts that Neil had recorded and putting them into the song. These days, it's so easy. You just flash stuff in and out because it's all digital files. Those days, we were recording with 2-inch tape. So you have an idea of, I want to get 16 bars of one solo and fly it in to a take that he had played 5 minutes before. It was a lot of like head scratching, calculator, trying to figure out the offset of the 2 multi-track machines. Anyway, I got it done, and thus, when we went to record the music videos, Neil and Randy went to play solos, and they really didn't know what was what. I'll put a link to these videos at the bottom here. But neither Randy nor Neil really remembered exactly what they had played or who had played what. So if you look at the music video, in the fast part, you can see there's like not very much synced, like what note is this guy playing? They're just like rocking out with big energy, but it's not too exacting because really they were having a really hard time remembering the solos that they had played. The other thing that was really interesting is we just got Neil to sing on the chorus, but he couldn't remember the words. So we wrote them up with a felt pen on a big piece of cardstock and put it on the floor. And that's one of the reasons that if you look at the video, he's wearing sunglasses. I know Neil wears sunglasses a lot, but in this case, he was wearing sunglasses because he didn't want it to be evident to the camera that he was having to read all the lyrics. And once he did that, Randy put on a pair of sunglasses too, just so they kind of had the same vibe going. Some shots of me playing drums here, trying to break some sticks and break a sweat. I've slowed this down so you can see in the background, there are some props there from the Garage Band tour, something that Neil had done previously, that were in the building. The other thing you'll notice is Neil Young's got this strap with these really long fringes on it, leather fringes, and that was a gift from Randy. I think Randy had had some of these leather straps hand-tooled years and years ago, like either in BTO or Brave Belt, and he brought one for Neil as a gift, as I remember it. And this blue footage with Neil playing acoustic is from the slow version of the Prairie Town music video. There's Neil singing when he's a kid, me playing in the background, different shirt. Now, Neil didn't actually play acoustic on the song. We just thought it would look better than him standing around. And there's the ethereal Margo Timmins with big hair singing in the way that only she can. In the background here, you'll see it says Ragged Glory. That's a stencil that they used on all the rock cases for that tour. And as I mentioned earlier, the Ragged Glory album was done in the same building. It was like Neil Young and Crazy Horse. So here are the guys rocking out together. And then here you'll see there's like a kind of a zoom shot onto the kick drum head and the logo. Now let's look at that again slowly. You see that? That was a problem. Randy had hired a graphic design company to make a new logo for the band Bachman. But he used the cogs, the gear motif that they had used so prevalently in BTO, and the rest of the band sued him. Now, it's kind of weird when you think the rest of the band is like, his brother Timmy, his brother Robbie, Fred. They sued Randy and says, you can't use a gear. Or maybe they threatened a lawsuit. Here's a different version of the video, and look at that. We had to go in and edit that video frame by frame using what's called rotoscoping and make it into a circle instead of a gear to avoid being sued. So that's my time hanging out down at Neil Young's ranch recording music videos, and I still remember it real well. It was quite a trip. That would have been sometime in about 92. Now, when John Nowlan was giving me a ride down to the Ragland, he said, you want to hear Neil's new single? And he plays one of the songs from Harvest Moon. Now, you guys probably know this album because it was a big album for him, but it hadn't been released at that time, and it was really great to hear. A little secret that I was told is a lot of the reverb that you hear on the vocals was recorded underground. At Broken Arrow Ranch, under one of the buildings, there's like an old cave kind of bunker, and they use that for sonic recap. Like basically you set some speakers up and some microphones, and you use the natural reverberant qualities of that space. If you listen to Harvest Moon and you hear that reverb, especially for the background vocals, which I think a lot of that is Linda Ronstadt and then Neil Young's sister, you can really hear the natural reverberant qualities of the cave. So as you may or may not know, shortly after this, we were out on tour promoting this album, and I had a really serious motorcycle accident. That's when I stopped. I haven't played a note pro since. So about a year later, Neil Young was coming to Vancouver to play BC Place. I was living in Vancouver, and he was playing with Pearl Jam, and I contacted John Nowlan from Neil's studio, and I said, look, is there any way that you can get me a backstage pass? Not because I want to be like a sycophant or ass kisser, but I was on crutches. And John says, yeah, no problem. I'll make sure you watch the show from the side of the stage. Because as you can imagine, Pearl Jam, Neil Young, mosh pit, crutches, not good. So they set me up on the side of the stage. I could sit in a chair, watch the whole show. And then when I was leaving, I saw this old bus in the parking lot. It was the Buffalo Springfield bus. And I went up and knocked on the door. And sure enough, Neil was inside with his son. And I said hi, and he's like, hey, what happened to you? And I told him. Now, Neil has been riding motorcycles all his life. He could totally relate, and he felt really bad for me. And interestingly enough, a few years later, he came back to Vancouver, and he played at the Pacific Coliseum. And I took a good friend of mine there who was a big Neil fan. But after we've been backstage waiting with about 50 other people, and they've all won contests, or they're with the radio station, and they want to press the flesh and get an autograph or whatever. And I and my friend say, look, let's go. Like, this is just it's not a very intimate scene anyway. And as we're leaving, we're heading to the loading bay at the Pacific Coliseum. Who walks up but Neil Young and his bodyguard or whatever? And he sees me. And he goes, hey. And I'm like, wow. It's like, I haven't spent that much time with the guy. He remembered me. And the first thing he said is like, how's your leg? I'm thinking like, okay, you're as big a star as Neil Young. Like, you have that high a profile and prominence, and you remember some drummer that you spent a little bit of time with and that I had a motorcycle accident. And that was like, wow, he's a real guy. That's pretty cool. Anyway, that's my long drawn out story about working with Neil Young. I may do some other videos with some of the bands that I ended up sharing the stage with or touring with, and there are a lot of them. Actually, one of the first bands that I worked in the studio with was Nazareth, so maybe I'll dig out some stories from that and get on that another time. But anyway, thanks for watching and listening. Long live rock and roll.